my fellow Americans. If you think you know politics, think again. I'm Michael Cohen, and every week on When You Know, we're pulling back the curtain on power, politics, media, and the people making headlines. On my new WABC radio show, you'll hear conversations from names that you know. People like Jerry Falwell Jr., Anthony Scaramucci, Alan Dershowitz, and many, many more. Maybe, just maybe, we'll even hear from the president. No scripts, no spin, just real conversations with people who were in the room where it happened. And trust me, we've got some very big surprises coming. Look, I've spent years at the center of politics, controversy, and power. I know the players, I know the stories, and now I'm bringing you inside. When You Know, Sundays at 5 p.m. on WABC Radio, and When You Know Unleashed, wherever you get your podcasts. Because with me, you never know who's going to show up.
This is going to be an extremely busy month. I have to watch 104 soccer games, follow the pregame, the postgame, yell useless opinions at the TV. It's a lot. So I knew that when it comes to screening for colon cancer, the choice was clear. The Cologuard Plus test. It can be used at home and can only take 15 minutes, so I can do it during halftime and not miss any action. If you are 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about screening for colon cancer with the Cologuard test. You can also request a prescription at Cologuard.com.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome once again to your weekend as we continue here with the powerhouse blowtorch signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC, proudly broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation, the world, and I'm even confident out into the cosmos. Welcome to the Dr. Sky Experience, especially if you're a new listener. Our show content contains great information from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. We like to call it a sort of theater of the mind, where, of course, you can participate with your questions and comments, as we love those in critical thinking with dialogue. And that contact number, as always, is 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-WABC. And all we humbly ask is that when you do call, that you try to stay on topic with respect to our great guests and the limited time that we have. We'd like to thank our helmsmen, both Bill and Jackson, for navigating this radio station's power so when you call, you can be heard far and wide, not only here around the nation, but imagine, all the way around the world and deeper out into the cosmos. Tonight's adventure, a very special guest in hour number 1, and we'll introduce her in just a moment. The content will be how do miracles work, the mystery of consciousness from the quantum world, and so much more as we do talk about these subjects from time to time. The mystery, the intersection of the quantum world and that of consciousness and of miracles.
What if I told you that every miracle you've ever heard about operates according to one simple, discoverable law? Every spontaneous healing, every impossible rescue, every moment when the laws of physics seem to bend. Not coincidence, not divine favoritism, not random grace dispensed to the lucky few, but a precise spiritual law as reliable as gravity, as measurable as magnetism, as learnable as any principle that governs reality. Edgar Cayce discovered this law after documenting over 14,000 psychic readings spanning 4 decades. He saw blind people regain sight, terminally ill patients recover completely, broken bones heal overnight. And in case after case, he traced each miracle back to the same underlying principle. The religious establishment doesn't want you to know this law because it would make them obsolete. The medical industry fears it because it would transform their business model. The scientific community ignores it because it challenges their materialist worldview. But here's what's going to validate everything you've intuited about the power of consciousness. Miracles aren't supernatural events that violate natural law. They're natural events that operate according to a higher law. A law that governs the relationship between mind, spirit, and matter. A law that you can learn, apply, and use to create what others would call impossible. Today, you discover the hidden law behind every miracle. Why some people heal while others don't. Why prayer works for some, but not for others. Why visualization creates reality for certain individuals, but remains wishful thinking for most. And most importantly, how to align yourself with this law so completely that what seems miraculous to others becomes your normal way of creating reality.
Katie Asher is our special guest, author of a fantastic book, The Book of Heaven. Katie's remarkable story explores the intersection of science, spirituality, consciousness, and one mother's extraordinary journey from her severely neurologically injured autistic son, Houston. The story has sparked conversations among those interested in neuroscience, faith, and the mysteries of human consciousness. Katie Asher is a writer, researcher, and a mother whose memoir, The Book of Heaven, a story of hope for the outcast, the broken, and for those who lost faith, co-authored with her severely neurologically injured autistic son, Houston, has ignited international conversations about consciousness, spiritual perception, and the reality of the soul. Katie Asher, thank you for joining us as we move deeper into our weekend on the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you this morning?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, Katie, it's been about a year since we touched on this particular subject, and I know I say this humbly. I don't think we did complete justice to the conversation. So if you don't mind just refreshing us so people are understood, I'm liking to try to bring this together with the quantum physics of prayer, and obviously so many subjects about miracles and your story, which is so important.
Sure thing. So the background of our story is that my son was severely neurologically injured by vaccines as an infant. And he basically regressed into this silent prison. And all I could see was the chaos, this chaotic body and the destruction that would eventually be diagnosed as severe autism. And 21 years later, we found a way to teach him to communicate by pointing to letters, one letter at a time, and eventually he gained enough motor skills so that he could independently communicate by pointing to letters. Now, the very first thing that struck me as odd was when he began spelling out the Declaration of Independence.
Amazing.
And I'm like, what is going on?
Exactly. Blessings to your son and every autistic child who may not have had this evolution, as we call it, but
right.
This is amazing. So tell us more. I mean, what's so powerful about this story, and excuse me for interrupting, what's so powerful about your story is that as we try to bring the science side of this to the equation, and also with great respect to those that are very religious in the spiritual world, your story does connect, and as people will hear, a direct connection to these.
It absolutely does. And I want to say the very first thing that my son ever spelled independently was an answer to the question, if you could put any slogan on a T-shirt, what would it be? And my son spelled, I'm in here.
Wow.
And I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I believed the chaotic body. I didn't understand that motor is incredibly complex, and that if your motor is injured, that you as a human being are still fully intact, but your motor, which is what all of us use to communicate with each other and to the outside world, if that's broken, you can be a fully intact human being and no one will know it because your motor's broken.
Absolutely.
So anyway, my son began of many things, spelling out the Declaration of Independence. And I, of course, because he'd never been taught anything, am confused because I'm like, where is this information coming from? How does he know this? And then it began to be beyond just being able to recite a photo, like from a photographic memory.
Exactly.
It was him understanding the constructs, the actual philosophy, the ideas, and he's giving me these incredible perceptions of ideas that he had never been taught or been exposed to, or so I thought.
That's amazing.
And and so that was my introduction to what on earth was going on beyond what I could visually see and observe. And then came, and this really gets into the quantum physics and prayer, which is so important to what you wanted to discuss.
You bet.
And that was when my son, I began to just ask, how on earth did you get all of this knowledge? Where is this coming from? And I asked this funny question. I said, you just have really good hearing. And my son said, spells out, I can hear thoughts. And I'm stunned, first of all. And my very first question was not of faith. It wasn't of trusting him or believing in him. It was, are you lying? That was the first question I asked him, because I had doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and he spelled, you don't get the kind of gift that I have if you lie. And so I began testing him over and over again. And not only did he pass every single test, but I then began to ask him questions in my mind without ever speaking. And he was answering the questions on the letterboard without any physical, like, verbal, out loud words ever being spoken.
No, Katie, this is a very amazing story here. And this one, if I may take the liberty of expressing this to the audience, and you, of course, can do it better than me, but to segue to this, your son had not been able to speak for 17 years, and then one day he blurts out to you, looking you in the eye, with no blinking, I love you. That's incredible. Tell us that.
Well,
I mean, your words are better than mine. This is amazing.
Yes. Okay, so that was the story that happened earlier when he was 17 years old. And at that point, he had never had any language other than echolalia or scripting Disney words. And one night, I was laying on the couch. I was utterly exhausted. And he came and sat at my feet and was perfectly still, which is not normal. And he reached over and tugged at the blanket just like you would, with perfect intention, like you would to get someone's attention. And he spoke and said, Mama. And I opened my eyes because I was shocked that I heard his voice and that he had done something so intentional. And when I opened my eyes, he was looking directly into my eyes, and he said, I love you.
Wow.
And he said it with a perfectly clear voice. And whenever you have waited 17 years for your child to speak to you and say your name and say, I love you, that changes something inside you. And I was, at the time, I was actually going through yoga certification. That's what I was doing.
I see.
And I had been challenged with this idea because I was so discouraged. I had been challenged that my good had just as much chance of happening as bad. And that, to me, this was offensive because I had been just living this hellish existence of despair and desperation and hopelessness. And when they told me that good had just as much chance of happening as bad, I was extremely resistant to that idea. And then I had this miracle with my son where my son spoke and said, Mama, I love you, after 17 years of never hearing his.
Katie, that's very powerful. And I want to segue to the audience here because I'm sure many out there with the love of their children, many have experienced autism in the family, and this is obviously something that I think you could be of great guidance. But what we're trying to do here on the Dr. Sky Experience, and you'll be the one leading the charge on this in a moment, I just wanted to set the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, have you experienced miracles in your life? How do they work? What's consciousness? And the whole story here, we're trying to tie in what she is going to tell us. Who's she? Katie Asher, the quantum physics of prayer. And obviously this whole story of consciousness, telepathy, and faith. What a powerful story. The number's 1-800-848-9222. Get in early. And all we ask for all of our guests out there, we love you dearly, is that, and especially our callers, is that you just try to stay on topic for so many topics that we do talk about here on the Dr. Sky Experience. But let me stand here and sit here and just describe the definition of consciousness that at least some agree on. The subjective, first-person experience of being aware of oneself and your surroundings. Sounds really simple. But going on, Katie, to something even more prolific, miracles, an extraordinary event that defies natural or scientific laws, divine, supernatural intervention. And if we go back to like comic book days, all heroes have superpowers, right? So in your story, This is amazing as it evolves. So describe what you believe is this intersection between quantum physics. I mean, hardly anybody on Earth, believe me, I'm not the scholar in that at all, but certainly have good intuition in some of that area. How does this all relate so people understand this?
Sure. So it actually goes back to what I was dealing with in that when I was doing my yoga instruction and they were telling me that good had just as much chance of happening as bad, and I was resistant to this idea. And the little lesson they gave me was they asked me to think about something that was real, like a table or a chair.
Sure.
And then they said, well, now what was that before it was a table or a chair? And most people, when you ask that, they go, it was the raw material, right? It was a tree, or it was wood, or it was metal, or whatever that was.
Sure.
But in reality, it was a thought. It was an idea. And the second question is the most important, because it says, would the table or the chair exist if no one had ever thought of them? And they would not.
No, it's amazing.
It's not possible for a chair or a table to manifest itself. Our thoughts are energy, and they actually they abide by the laws of energy. And so that night, when Houston told me that he could hear thoughts, I was taken back to whenever I'd been given that little lesson on thought.
Yes.
And I realized, oh my goodness, they were right. Thought is energy. And
you bet. And the laws of thermodynamics say that.
Exactly.
One of them, and primarily without going to school here, and we're in the theater of the mind, as we like to call this, obviously as many people enjoy that phraseology. But what's really interesting from my part is if you look at one of the basic laws, energy is neither created nor destroyed, just moving through to different levels. But Katie, if you don't mind, let's go to the callers, because as always, with great guests like yourself, we're lighting up the phone lines here. And I'm sorry, we only have a limited time with you. We'll do this in the future, I'm sure. Let's go to line number 1, Gregory in Michigan. He's on with Katie Asher, the author of the Book of Heaven. Good morning to you. How are you, sir?
Very good, Mr. Positive Boom Shakalaka. Now, I'm going to play the little bit of devil's advocate here. When you talk about miracles, Dr. Sky, and your distinguished guest, you're talking about a break in reality. If God, and it's divine, and it's a super being, if you will, God, if he is by definition all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-seeing, and he knows everything, and he knows the continuum,
yes,
a miracle is a break in reality. That means he made a mistake. In essence, that's what a miracle is, because if he's divine and he knows what Dr. Sky is going to do for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, every single moment of every single day, doesn't it seem that if there's a miracle, that means that he is not omniscient, all-powerful, all-knowing? I'm sorry to be controversial, but that's what Mr.
That's
Positive is all about. I've read the stories, the book.
We welcome conversation. But, Greg, the interest of time, I think you've explained, and believe me, I have not the answer. So let's go to Katie, who's give us her iteration of what you just said. And I appreciate Greg. And, Katie, please continue on what Gregory was talking about.
So there are natural laws, which are basically our physical laws. And we can argue about what the definition of a miracle is, but it typically is something outside of what we can manifest with our own physical work, with our own natural laws. And it basically requires us using the laws that are beyond the natural laws that exist in the immaterial realm. And that would include energy, which does go into both the immaterial and the material. So it supersedes both realms.
Sure.
As far as the omniscience and omnipotence of God, he is so wonderful that he allows our prayers to be answered. And it is through, and he even says, all things are possible for the one who believes. So he gives us the measure to ask and to believe and to use the God-given gifts that we have with our immaterial being, which is our spirit, to manifest the very things that seem impossible in the natural world, which are limited to the physical laws.
No, you say it so well. I wish we had 500 hours to do this kind of a show, because one of the things I want to jump rather quickly here, because we have an amazing full board of callers here, and I'm not surprised, Katie, with the subject. If you're just joining us, Katie Asher, author of a phenomenal book, ladies and gentlemen, The Book of Heaven, a very detailed, discussion, in her opinion, living it, of course, with her son that she loves dearly, autistic child. But then again, I don't even know if that's a proper word to use, and how much more respectful can I be? An amazing young child, an amazing adult who obviously is opening up and maybe giving us more answers to what's out there beyond. Also, some of the things that you're working on, it also goes to connect to people that are obviously very high up in the neuroscience area, like a Dr. Jeff Tarrant. I mean, just talk about him for a moment before we go to this break. I want to try to get everybody on. The connection is strong between what you were saying and science.
Yes, Dr. Jeff Tarrant is amazing, and he has actually done a bunch of EEGs on Houston, as well as some other non-speakers, showing what's actually going on in their brain when they are being able to be proven to be using telepathy. So he discusses that. Then we have Dr. Marjorie Willicott, who has been examining the footage of all of these different tests, and as well as collecting data from multiple non-speakers who are testifying of the metaphysical. And then Dr. Diane Powell, who, of course, was in the beginning stages of this, the preliminary researcher who was even believing that telepathy and Houston doesn't call it telepathy. I just want y'all to know. He calls it hearing thoughts. He calls it seeing the unseen. And so let me explain really quickly why this is possible. And we are a spirit. That's what we all are. We have a physical vessel. When at conception, there is an inorganic, that means not made of living matter or sourced of living matter, spark. It's literally an explosion, a light that goes off at conception, and it's inorganic. And which actually matches what Scripture says, that He is the light, and that His light is in man, and that's what happens at conception. And we're made in His image, and it is spirit. And the spirit itself, whenever a human being dies, their body stays and decays, but the spirit itself, which gave the body life, moves on. Now we know from the laws of thermodynamics that this energy cannot be lost. It's neither created nor destroyed. It's transferred. So it transfers from the immaterial to the physical. And then once it left the physical, where does it go? It goes to the spiritual. It is in the immaterial realm. All matter comes from the immaterial. And that's what's hard for us to understand. And it's why these materialistic logic and reasoning and constructs don't work and fail to explain our reality, is because they are limited to, and they don't take into consideration the source of all matter, which is immaterial.
You say it so well. We're almost up at that break, but Katie, not to go into the detail, and I want to tell people when they do get a copy of your book, The Book of Heaven, you go into a rather lengthy process of talking about your personal life struggles, which I don't feel is fair for me to go on and talk about, but I think it's amazing how you have recovered and you've moved on to a path where you love your son, and obviously that connection, a mother and a son, wow, that's super powerful. That defies any law of gravity, but it's so important here. Again, 1-800-848-9222, a very interesting subject, Katie, where we're talking about, because science doesn't know everything, obviously. You know, some people say the more we know of science, the less we really know of the world. And we had a gentleman on here a few months ago, or I think it was a month ago, Dr. Michael Gillen. He was the science correspondent for, Good Morning America for so many years, a good friend of mine. And he's talked about in his world, he was an atheist. And he came full circle when he was educated by Carl Sagan. He had his PhDs in math, physics, and astronomy. That he believes, of course, in the spiritual side of this, that there is really a connection. And that connection, of course, is his faith and many of the people that are out there, that as we learn about the universe, obviously there must be some sort of power out there that created this big, vast shebang, as many people call it, a most amazing story. But Katie, when we come back from the break, as I mentioned, I'm glad for it and happy for this. A full board of callers that I'd like to get the conversations going. And of course, give us your website so people can know that before the hour runs out. Just tell us, and then we got to go to the break.
It's Asher.house.
Asher.house. More with Katie Asher, an amazing guest, ladies and gentlemen. She has an experience that is amazing. That's why we wanted to put her on the air here in front of the entire world, the Book of Heaven. We'll be right back after these announcements here on the Dr. Sky Experience. As we know from the world of quantum physics, time is run here, the hour of time, and that makes us go to this particular break. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The whole world is a series of miracles, but we're so used to them, we call them ordinary things. A quote from Hans Christian Andersen. 33 minutes after the hour, Katie Asher is our special guest, and we continue with you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to line number 2. We have Reverend Dr. D in California. You are on with Katie Asher. Good evening to you, sir. How are you?
Well, good evening, Dr. Sky. Thank you for your navigation. I would be lost without you. Katie, I'm fascinated. I host a program on here on the West Coast called Tell Me Your Story, and it just so happens that just a little over a week ago, one of the subjects was mysticism and miracles. And one of the conclusions I have come to is that the separation between, the perceived separation between science and, as we like to call it, religion or spirituality, doesn't really exist other than in the mind of man. And that when you talk about miracles, and I'm all in favor of what you're talking about, I absolutely love the conversation, we are talking about the fact that because we don't understand what's happening, we call it a miracle. I find it fascinating, for example, that the Catholic Church, following the death of a pope, will wait X number of, years, and then they must verify 3 miracles that are allegedly attributed to that pope, i.e. Pope John Paul II, let's just say.
Okay.
And if they are able to do so, guess what? He becomes a saint, or at least the church makes him a saint. So I find it fascinating, and I'll just wrap this up by saying that my mother asked me this question some years ago. She says, Richard, have you ever had any supernatural experiences? You could call them miracles or what have you.
Exactly.
At the time, I said that, well, if I did, they just appeared normal to me, which is how I view the miracles of Yeshua. He didn't think there was any big deal there because that's who he was. That's the way he was.
No, interesting.
And that's why when I look at people who are on the spectrum, such as your son, whether it's autism, Down syndrome, et cetera, those are the people who are the normal ones because they're in the now. They're here. They're not in the past or future. They're living right here. And the greatest miracle of all that I think Yeshua tried to teach us is that we are here to transform our lives.
Well, thank you, Dr. D. We appreciate it. I'm in the interest of time, Katie, he said a lot and a very good of a lot. So please continue, Katie. I thought that's fascinating to hear from him.
I think he had some wonderful points. And what's so interesting about, and I agree that Christ absolutely lived out the impossible in the natural world and showed us that it is possible. And one of the things I think was so interesting is whenever the woman with the issue of blood touched the hem of his garment, in the King James Version, he talks about how, who touched me, for I felt virtue flow out of me. He felt, and what we have to understand is he is the holiness of God incarnate. And so whenever virtue comes out of him, it literally can only produce holiness and cleanliness and wholeness. That's what he is. And so all of that we think is impossible is actually in him, in the fullness of him. And the way we receive all of it is through faith. And faith is thought, belief, Houston says that belief is becoming. He said that abundance comes from faith and the harvest comes from work. But we try to do everything just with work. And then we get frustrated because we don't understand the part of creation, which is the thought, the mind. And we skip that part and we think it can all just come from work, and it can't. We have to actually believe, and that is the taking the will of man and instituting the mind of man to produce the work of man.
You say it so well. We'll continue with the callers, the full board of callers here, which we do appreciate on the Dr. Sky Experience. Line number 3 is Dave in Pennsylvania. You've been patient. Good morning. You're on with Katie Asher. How are you doing?
It's Katie, your guest's name, right? Not Haiti or anything.
Katie.
Katie.
K-A-T-I-E.
I think she's a very good mother to her son. Beautiful. Really took the time to study outside of his interest for his benefit, and the young man has a future if he so chooses. You know how kids are. I don't know how old he is now. You said something about 17. If he chooses to make decent paths, he will have a decent path. A lot of it will have to do with Katie's upbringing.
Absolutely.
I want to bring up one thing about the spiritual world. A lot of people do apparently. Now, this ties back. I told the producer of this show, he didn't say his name, that I did write a short story, Dr. Sky. I called you last night, and this is all related. My short story was about tropical rainforest deforestation and the restoring of the deforested areas of the tropical rainforest, the restoring of them. Brazil's government used to have a program, I don't know if they still do, called Ecoloom. I don't know how far it spreads throughout the tropical countries where the tropical rainforests are, but they had an Ecoloom, which was an agricultural type of program, and that's where I'm getting at the spiritual thing. You know, a lot of people get their spiritual release aided by things that grow and they smoke and they do take in pill form medical supplies and stuff like that. They get their spiritual beliefs that way. So
Dave, I think you made your point. I don't want to cut you, but I guess I have to. Katie, if you would like to respond, I'm trying to get everybody on here in the limited amount of time and space that we do have. But Dave, appreciate your commentary. And I don't know if you do want to comment on what he had said. I think they made a couple of good spiritual points.
Well, definitely the Lord is the creator of all creation, and people absolutely do have spiritual experiences in nature, and nature can be healing. The thing about the spiritual realm that people need to understand is that it includes both truth and deception, just like our material world does. And so in every aspect, we have to operate with discernment. And that doesn't mean just taking anything and using anything. It means operating with discernment and being able to understand that which is good and that which is not good. And so absolutely we need to be discerning.
Line 4, we go to Gus in the Bronx. You're on with Katie Asher. Good morning to you. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, sir. My whole life, I see premonitions, and a lot of times they scare me.
Wow.
One of the first, I tell you one of the first ones, later on in my life, 2 days before the towers got hit, I saw the towers on fire.
Oh, my God.
And I woke up the next day, and I said, what kind of dream was that? It doesn't make sense.
Not at all. Right?
Those towers cannot catch on fire. They're made out of steel. How can he? And then 2 days later, boom.
And you had a premonition. That's amazing. A premonition.
Yes. And when I exercised, when I was young, I used to exercise with a very good guy that was in charge of the Secret Service after Reagan got shot.
I see.
But when I was, the first premonition that happened to me, when I was 5 years old, I had tuberculosis.
Oh, I'm
they
sorry.
had put me in the hospital my right lung was collapsed. And the doctors are coming around and they're saying the condition and this is how it is. I was in a sanitarium. I was going to die. And I woke up that night. I opened up 2 big doors. I remember. I went in the balcony. They had me in Greece in a place called Pedeli, that when they put you, you're on your way out. And I said, God, I don't want to die. Please, I don't want to die. What are they saying? And the doctors don't know what happened. I got cured.
That's
but
amazing.
If you do only good in life and you don't have evil thoughts and you try to, something protects you.
Right, thoughts become actions. You better believe it.
Yeah.
And I hate to cut you short. I mean, it's amazing. I keep apologizing, but I'm running the clock here, and I do appreciate it. Katie, we got about 2 minutes before the next break, but again, Gus, an amazing premonition you're sharing with us. How do these things happen? Katie, give us some insight, from the spiritual side.
All time is happening at the same time. Our linear concept of time is misunderstood. All time is happening at the same time. Think of it like a record player where all of it exists, and where you put the needle is where the focus is. But for those who are more spiritually attuned, Houston calls it opening windows in time, so they can actually see something that's happening. And the miracle is that our thoughts and our beliefs can actually have an impact on things in another place in space and time. And there's actually scientific evidence, and they've done experiments where they can actually change the shape and the form of how sand operates according, essentially how it collects and becomes organizes itself.
We're up against a break, Katie. Believe me, I apologize to everybody on both sides. If we had 62 hours, no, don't be sorry. What I think is one of the conclusions here is that Einstein talked about the space-time continuum and the general arrow of time, not that this is absolute, moves in the direction of forward, but let's look at the possibility of jumping over that line. And again, this relationship that we're having with you today and this morning, talking about the connection between spirituality, what you and your son have experienced, linking together the quantum world and keeping our minds open about consciousness and miracles. We'll be right back. We'll do our very best to get everybody who's called on the air here on the Dr. Sky Experience with me, Steve Cates, as we move toward those days we call the dog days of summer. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
46 minutes after the hour, we continue with an overload of callers, and we consider them friends of the Dr. Sky and Dr. Sky Experience. Katie Asher is our guest. Her website, in case you'd like to check it out, asher.house. Let's go to line number 5 and say good morning to Frank in the Bronx. You've been patient. What's your concerns, questions, or observations?
Hey, Dr. Sky, I'm Asher. Okay, a couple of comments, okay? First of all, there has to be a higher power. I believe in God. There has to be a higher power to create science. And the second thing is, it's theoretically possible to part the Red Sea. That's my comment.
Well, that would be difficult. Right? Again, that's something you have to have extreme faith, right? How would someone part the Red Sea? Well, God could do it. But, Katie, that's amazing because it goes into deep spiritual belief in things that we've heard about, in the Old and New Testament and in many other cultures around the world. Simply what? Miracles that we do not understand. Frank, you brought up something interesting.
So what people don't understand, and I shouldn't say they don't understand, there's certainly some people who do understand, but most people just aren't really aware of when they're thinking about these concepts, is that there are 2 types of energy. There is kinetic energy, which is energy that's already in motion, and there's potential energy. And that is energy that has the potential to be released, but it has not yet been released. And in potential energy, there are 2 types of potential energy, and one is exothermic and one is endothermic.
Exactly.
And so these are, and our thoughts, which are also energy, have an impact on what type of potential energy is released. The other aspect of that is our emotions, which our emotions are also energy. And our emotions have an impact on our thoughts and on how we essentially decide what we're going to believe which of course then releases either exothermic or endothermic energy. And so these are like all the things that have to be in alignment for miracles to happen. Our thoughts and our emotions have to be in alignment. And we can literally create reality with our thoughts and our emotions. And the key is to bring these into alignment with what Christ has actually accomplished for us, which is guaranteed. It's done. The work is already accomplished, and we receive it all through faith. And
Amazing.
so that's so critical to understand, and that's all been accomplished in the atonement.
Well, in the short amount of time that we've had here, I think we've done some justice to the subject, but the Book of Heaven, ladies and gentlemen, getting it wherever good books are sold, you know where that is. Subtitled, Story of Hope for the Outcast, the Broken, and Those Who Lost Faith. A great dynamic, a rather lengthy book, if I might add, filled with great information. Let's continue with the callers. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I feel like I'm at a carnival right now, trying to make sure that everybody at least can get to see what's happening at the center stage in the Theater of the Mind. Let's go to line number 1. We welcome Michael in New Jersey. Michael, you're on with Katie Asher. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm going to tell you, I was converted directly by taking communion. When I was 16, I was born Jewish.
Yes.
I was told I should be a rabbi, but I felt there was something missing. Many years later, I paid my respect to somebody who was a coworker, and I knew nothing about Christianity or anything. So when everyone stood up and got online, I got online too. I thought they were eating cookies. I took communion for 8 years.
Well, that's a very special cookie, my
by
friend.
the Holy Spirit directly.
Right. They don't make communion into Oreo cookies by any means. Right?
I'm telling you.
No, I love that analogy. Isn't that a great, Katie?
As a
Go ahead.
teacher for 13 years. And, you know, I'm leaving out so much detail, but it was all of a miracle, everything.
Amazing.
And I've had so many miracles happen personally.
Well, you know what's so interesting that you bring up the Eucharist, because what people need to understand is that he is the Word, right? And so that means that he is literally the Word, and he is God, and he is the Word, which is really gets back to that whole idea of consciousness. He is the source of everything, and we're made in his image. And then he became the seed, and the seed became the manna, the bread, and then the bread was broken for us. And so whenever it says that I am the bread of life, that I gave my body for you, and my body you will take and eat, and my blood you will drink. He is the vine, he is the bread, he is the seed, he is the Word. These are literally showing us in real time how the immaterial is transferred into the material. And whenever we partake it, we are receiving that translation from spirit to matter, and then into our spirit.
Yes, Katie, and I just want to do a programming note here. In hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen, another outstanding guest, a friend of ours, Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer on some of the most amazing topics in history, aviation history and such. We'll be speaking with him, of course, about something going on in the nation right now. One of the most amazing locomotives going back to American exceptionalism has been traveling across the country. It's called the Big Boy, one of the most amazing, iconic steam locomotives. We talk about that with our special guest, and also about the latest on Air Force One. We do know about the Air Force One that's now the replacement airplane until the others are finished. What happened with President Trump when he changed planes? This is an interesting story, but unfortunately we'll not take calls on this particular hour subjects in hour number 2, in due respect to our guest. We round up this hour by going to line number 2. Joe, you've been patient in New Jersey. Good morning to you. Thanks for your patience.
Yes, a miracle is a supernatural event where the impossible becomes possible. In December 24th, 1993, the Jersey Journal of New Jersey wrote an article on me, and the article was Where Angels Tread.
Oh.
I saw a vision of the Holy Family.
Amazing.
So miracles are true. They come from God.
Amazing, sir. Amazing testimony that you've given us here. Katie, this is interesting, and I want to go back to the concept. Many of my science friends that I've studied with over the years, many of them were vowed atheists, and they have a right to their opinion there, but many of those people, as I mentioned before. Dr. Michael Gillen, who was the chief science correspondent for Good Morning America, this is going back many, many years ago. Still, we had him on, a very interesting man. That conversion, because he's even said simply, I was an atheist, but now I believe there's much more to this whole universe. And look what he knows. 3 PhDs, astronomy, physics, mathematics, powerful stuff, but you don't have to have those degrees to be a believer. Continue, because we like to give every guest an opportunity to wrap up. Maybe that's not the right word, to give us you're on center stage right now in the theater of the mind. You got the floor.
There is just so much to discuss when you think about the immaterial becoming material and the Spirit of God coming to earth to impart himself and to save mankind. And there's really no way that I can do that subject justice. But what I can tell you is that these non-speakers prove the existence and the reality of the immaterial. They prove the reality of thought, that thought is energy, that it can transfer. They prove the existence of premonitions. They prove the existence of energy in complex forms that we have failed to consider. And the reason our materialistic views are so skewed and so like they don't work, the whole one of your callers said something about science, it simply, it's greater than what we perceive, and that we don't understand it the way it truly is.
Right.
And I agree with it. And that's because we have taken science, which is God's creation, and we've tried to put it into a framework of materialism, which uses man's reason and understanding and the limits of man's senses as the ultimate harbinger of truth. And that's not possible, because man's senses are only capable of perceiving 4% of the actual energy. And that
exactly. You say it right. Mm-hmm. The smallest amount of what we see in the universe, we only see 4% of the entire universe tying this in. But let me try something here unusual. Line number 5, Buzz is calling us from the great state of Hawaii. So we thought we'd jump right into it. Buzz, you've got a minute or two to express your thoughts way out there in the Pacific. Hope everything's well. How are you?
Yes, sir, Dr. Sky. Thank you for taking my call. This will be the Reader's Digest version. I was staying at the Thunderbird Motel in Bloomington, Minnesota. This had been back about 1992, waiting to take a flight the next morning from Minneapolis, then to Memphis, and then on to Greenville, Mississippi. Well, that night, I woke up, sat up in bed in the middle of the night, and I could hear my wife saying, "Buzz, Buzz." Now, she's down in Greenville, Mississippi. I'm up in Bloomington, Minnesota. So she picked me up at the Greenville airport the next morning, and she said, "You'll never know what happened last night. A tornado hit our house."
Oh, unbelievable.
So how do you explain that?
I don't know, Buzz, but we're short on time, and I keep apologizing because we're run by the clock, the quantum thing of space-time. Katie, a quick response from you, and Buzz, thank you, out there in the island paradise of Hawaii. At least I hope it is. Continue, please, Katie.
We're all connected. And whenever someone has a relationship with someone, a deep relationship with someone, it is absolutely possible for them to be able, for you to hear them and hear their thoughts. And this is why we've had so many stories of people knowing when, a relative something was happening with a relative, or you think of somebody and the phone rings and it's that person. And it's because we're all connected, and thought is energy, and thought transfers. It is able to go through time and space in ways that defy our materialistic limits.
Amazing.
And that's what you experienced, was a spiritual experience.
Totally amazing. Katie Asher, your book, The Book of Heaven. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen. Subtitled, A Story of Hope for the Outcast, the Broken, and Those Who've Lost Faith. God bless you and your son, and hope to do this again. Maybe we can do it in a longer format. Obviously, you rock, and I know by the number of phone calls that we get, a very popular guest. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, as we shift gears. If we haven't gotten to you in this hour, we will not take calls into the second hour, with due respect to our new guest, Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer. The Wall Street Journal says of Bill Yenne, he writes with cinematic vividness, talking about the early days of steam trains, another story of American exceptionalism, and then moving on to his specialty, aircraft, Air Force One, the new Qatari aircraft, and the new iterations. What happened with President Trump when he switched planes? As we know, the war in Iran continues to heat up. I'm Steve Cates, Dr. Sky. The Dr. Sky Experience continues on the other side of these announcements as we welcome in you to the Theater of the Mind in hour number 2. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Dr. Sky Experience as we move deeper into your weekend from what we call the powerhouse blowtorch signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC. Proud to be broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation and the world, and I'm sure even out to the cosmos. As we talk with you, not at you, about the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism, once again, and proud to say it, we like to think of us as a theater of the mind. We bring to you great guests. We love your commentary and critical thinking and dialogue, and you can, of course, contact us at 1-800-848-9222 or simply 1-800-848-WABC. Just like I'm on the WABC app. Why not download it? Because not only in the Theater of the Mind, you can explore many other rooms in this vast mansion of broadcast excellence. How about all the other great hosts that appear here 24/7 on this station, well over 100 years of age? I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our helmsmen as we continue to thank Bill and Jackson and, of course, those that do help us behind the scenes. A very interesting night. In hour number 2, another very special guest. He's been with us before. The author, historian, I should say, aviation expert, Bill Yenne. The Wall Street Journal describes him, and he writes with cinematic vividness. He's the author of more than 36 nonfiction books, as well as 12 novels. Bill Yenne, thanks for joining us on the West Coast. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure, my friend. You know, I'm looking at a copy that I printed off of your website here, and it's amazing here. Yes, I'm standing here on this particular forum at the podium saying, wow, all these different titles here. Look at this: Sitting Bull, Hap Arnold, the Imperial Japanese Army. Your books that go on about not only about aviation history, but also about American history, and so many other things. And you've even written a couple of novels, is that correct, that you could share with us during this hour? Tell us more about you.
I've written a couple of series of Westerns and Western novels, and they're available. One of the series is called the Ballad of a Westering Man. It's about a man who came west after the war, this being the war between the states, and he traveled across the Appalachians, chasing horizons and chasing sunsets. Met a girl in Kentucky and was about to settle down. She worked in an orphanage, where the man who had been at war was now with the woman who took care of the orphans that were left behind by that war. And but alas, there was a great fire, and many of the children died, and
how sad.
His girlfriend died, and he was blamed for it, and then he became a Westering man, traveling west into Colorado and Wyoming and up into Montana, and that's where the series starts. He's in Montana trying to cross the Great
Nothing like
Divide
Western
for
novels.
the winter.
Yeah,
So that's more than you wanted to know about my Westerns.
There you go.
But you asked.
Yes, I will. And we would love you here on this radio show because it's amazing. Bill Yenne, that's Bill, YENNE.com. You will be most impressed if you're a lover of books, like a gentleman that I know out in Radio Land named Tim. He, of course, gathers books like he was a vacuum, pulling up all that information. But the reason we have you here this morning, with total respect to you as an author, I wanted to shift over to American exceptionalism, a time in American history that maybe young people had no idea about. And there seems to be a lot, Bill Yenne, of activity, going and saluting America's steam locomotives of the past, these incredible machines, one of them that's running around the country. And maybe the listeners of this vast audience had seen it come down into Philadelphia, traveling across the country, and making its way back to Wyoming. The Union Pacific Big Boy, one of the most amazing locomotives ever built. Describe this to the audience, and why is that period of history, since you write about it, so important to this audience about American exceptionalism?
Well, I have in the past, if you read down on my list of books, written quite a few books on American railroad history as well as American aviation history. But why were these locomotives, these steam locomotives, important? Why were they exceptional? And why were they so unique to the United States? Well, the United States is a country, and we just celebrated the 250th anniversary, and in those 250 years, we sent our civilization to span a continent, and there are 300 million people who are descendants of that effort. And to span that continent, transportation was a key thing, and the railroads were an important part of that. If you look at the railroad maps of Europe from the 19th century and compare those to the United States, in the early 19th century, there was the beginnings of a very comprehensive network of rail lines in Europe and just a trickle of rail lines in the United States. By the end of that century, the comprehensive rail network in the United States dwarfed not only Europe, but the entire world. And running on those long-distance lines, thousands and thousands of miles across the country, distances unimaginable in Europe.
It's incredible.
Were the great steam locomotives. And there were, and speaking of American exceptionalism, you can't really talk about American exceptionalism without talking about entrepreneurs. And out of this churning, expanding civilization, three important companies emerged. We call them the big three of steam locomotives. There was the Lima Locomotive Works in Lima, Ohio, 1877. There was the Elko Company, the American Locomotive Company of Schenectady, New York, which actually didn't get its start until 1901, but it stood on the shoulders of many smaller companies. And then the biggest of the big three was the Baldwin Locomotive Works.
Amazing history.
Of Philadelphia. And it was it became the world's largest manufacturer of locomotives, produced over 70,000 through the years. But going back to Elko, they were the creators of the Big Boy.
Yes,
and
an amazing machine.
Yes, and this amazing machine came in the 20th century, It was built for the Union Pacific, which has had lines across the entire country and had to cross the Rocky Mountains, and it needed a great deal of power. So the big boy was produced for Union Pacific by Elko and Schenectady. They were built in the 1940s. Served only until 1959, and
short time.
It was a short time. There were 25 of these things built. They were 85 feet long. They weighed 1.2 million pounds.
Wow!
And
what a beast! Yeah.
They had the motive power to get those long freight trains across the Rocky Mountains.
You bring up some good points, Bill. This is interesting because I'm looking at this on the internet, as many people. But, folks, to you in the audience of the Dr. Sky Experience, how many of you out there, and it changes the subject just slightly, railroad enthusiasts, we look at the model trains. When I was little, we had the Lionel trains, we had HO, then we went to N-Gauge. And I wonder, it's a select audience out there that probably, Bill, I'm sure, like yourself, has so much fascination by model trains. But, I saw the big boy when it was out here in Arizona. And this is what I'm asking the audience out there of the Dr. Sky Experience. Did you have an opportunity, folks, in the East Coast, if you're listening, of course, and all over the country? This particular locomotive, when you see it, it's not only amazing, it's just so amazing about pride in America. As you're describing, Bill Yenne, this is amazing. I mean, those boilers, imagine how much coal, I guess in the old days you had to shovel into that little area in the firebox. And then I understand the big tender. Was that a tender of coal or was it also oil to keep these monsters spinning?
By the 20th century, oil had replaced coal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. And maybe the environmentalists don't like it because this thing's blowing out a lot of smoke, but you can't miss it. And I just wonder, if you have comments on this, we're going to segue to a couple of subjects that Bill Yenne has expertise in. The contact number to get in our Theater of the Mind is 1-800-848-9222. Of course, discussing with a man who's written so many books. How many books would you say right now, and you're counting, that you've actually produced so far? I mean, I'm looking at a stack here that's bigger than you'd see in many bookstores, but you have so many titles. How many books have you produced so far?
Oh, there's been a lot. I like to say that I've written more than 3 dozen on aviation and historical topics, but it's probably twice that.
Amazing.
Or more.
No, it's an incredible story. But to put this in perspective, this big boy locomotive right now, if you go to the Union Pacific website, if I'm correct on this, and people can fact check it, that it's heading back to the west and it'll eventually, at the end of July, be back to its home base that's up in Wyoming, one of their headquarter locations. I believe it's now, at least today it was, in Altoona, Pennsylvania, in a most amazing area for railroad fans called the Horseshoe Curve. And I've seen it a long time ago. So if you're listening out there in Pennsylvania, just check that website out. Or if you've seen it, give us a call. Describe this beast to us because, again, focusing in this little segment with Bill Yenne, American exceptionalism, how we built these incredible machines well before the days of diesel. And, well, as you know from many sci-fi particular television shows of the past, as powerful as a locomotive, but that went to who, right, Bill? Superman. So there you go.
Yeah. And, and it's also a testament to American exceptionalism that they got this thing that was retired in 1959 and restored it completely to full working condition. And that was done in 2019 for the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, which is another story that certainly drips of American exceptionalism.
Bill, I got a question. Is there fact or fiction behind the golden spike? I mean, literally, if somebody knew where it was, if it was 24-karat gold, they would have, tried to pull it out of the rail. Is that just they obviously did meet, but was that really not a golden spike? I don't want to sound foolish to the audience. What was it? A facsimile or just, who knows?
It was a golden spike, and they
Spray painted it?
They drove the, no, they, well, it was, 1869, spray paint was really hard to find.
Just kidding. No, I know. No, that's amazing.
It was gold because it had been made in California because the meeting at Promontory, Utah, of the rails included the Central Pacific building east from California and the Union Pacific building west from Omaha, and they finally met. And when they met, they finished it off with a ceremonial golden spike. They had piles of dignitaries from both ends of the country there, and they watched all of this, and they pounded the golden spike, and they had a photo op, and then they pulled the spike, and it was was preserved for posterity. It is.
Well, Bill Yenne, appreciate your answer on that. I never knew that, and I'm sure many listeners did not. 1-800-848-9222 takes us into the theater of the mind with you, our guests out there around the nation, around the world. If you're just joining us, Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer, of course, the author of more than 3 dozen nonfiction books, as well as a dozen novels. And a quote again from the Wall Street Journal, and I quote, Bill Yenne writes with a cinematic vividness. His books, of course, BillYenne.com. Bill, before we change subjects on this, and I wanted to do this because your primary expertise, it's all over the board here with history, American history, and so much. Let's segue, if we can, right now to talk a little bit about this big air show that's coming up here to many people who are in the aviation world, and that's Oshkosh. What can you tell us about it? Because I know it's coming up, next weekend, I guess.
Well, it's America's biggest air show. It's a fly-in of private pilots, military pilots, commercial pilots. It's warbirds. It's experimental aircraft. It's the place to go to scratch your aviation itch.
Yes, and it's a great itch to have because look at the amazing stories that we get from Chuck Yeager and all the great aviators as we talk about the female aviators, too. So many stories, and we've had many guests on here talking, including yourself, about the stories of American exceptionalism in the world of aviation. But, Bill, this is amazing. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
I was just going to say, go to Oshkosh, and you'll meet amazing aviators that maybe you'd never heard of, but once you have met them and you know them, you'll find references to them all over this thing called the internet, and you will expand your pool of knowledge and your pool of exciting things to be interested in. Expand your interest.
Our family has a website that I want to promote out here for people who are in the aviation world, photorecon.net. I think you know about that, and I think it does a very good job. That's my brother and his photo team. So, in other words, this big air show, I'm sure they're going to be there. But it's a special group of people. I mean, they get really excited about this, including the days of the great Reno air races that we've covered so many times, and I'm sure you've been there more than you can count the fingers on your hand, right? It's amazing air shows.
Yeah, I think Oshkosh is coming, and it's not an event for other people. It's an event for you. Mm-hmm. So I would say if you're planning to motor west, as they say in the song, or motor east,
yes,
put Oshkosh on your road trip plans for this summer.
Bill Yenne, before we go to this break in a moment, I just want to ask you, personal side, the personal question, if you'd like to answer it. Of all the people you've interviewed from the aviation world, who tops the charts as the most fascinating person that you've ever spent time with? And I'd love the audience to hear this because so many of the greats in aviation, many of them have passed on. Who might you say might that have been?
Well, it's I spent a lot of time with General Curtis LeMay.
Wow.
I But I've talked to a lot of people, maybe people that you've never heard of, like Harry Gann at Douglas Aircraft.
Okay.
Eric Simonson, who was with North American, and
I know Eric very well. Yes, Eric Simonson, another great author too. Right.
Yes, he is, and I would say knowing him has been a real treat. And I think we probably know a lot of people, have a lot of people in common. I know that you know Nick Veronico.
Absolutely. And Nick was instrumental in getting us to fly the Sophia, the 747 SP, many times on those 12 to 13-hour flights that we went up on. And just so the audience knows what we're talking about, NASA had acquired, as you know, Bill, a Pan Am 747 SP, one of the shorter versions, as we call it, fuselage lengthwise, and maybe even wing-wise. You know more about it. And they converted it, NASA, with a German organization, into Sophia, the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, and we would fly on that, and Nick Veronico was instrumental to get us on there. What is it? It's a 100-inch telescope that, ladies and gentlemen, you could see above when we were at 49,000 feet. It was above most of the atmospheric moisture, and it was actually observing for hours. And that was incredible, Bill, just to be part of that. But I know it's retired down in Tucson now. An interesting thing, but we have Nick Veronico to thank for that.
So those are some highlights of my career. People that I got to know who you know and I know, and but others may not know. But well, this is the point of me scolding your listeners to get themselves over to Oshkosh.
Yes.
How are you going to meet those people unless you go where they are? And
you better believe it. It's a big deal.
They gather in droves at Oshkosh. So, if you're interested in meeting great people in aviation, that's the place to go.
You got it, Bill. Oshkosh, one of the best air shows, and like you say, the most prolific one, talking about aviation from all different angles, all different aircraft. If you want to meet people, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, but hopefully you can get a hotel room. But, Bill, before we go to the break, I always segue to what's visible, part of the astronomy side of the equation here in the Dr. Sky Experience, for people that want to know, and they do, about what we can see in the nighttime sky. So if your skies are clear, take a look in the northwest sky. You can't miss Venus. It's incredible, the brightest object that's in the sky other than the sun and the moon. And if you look at that planet, just to the lower right, it was actually closer the other day. We call it a special conjunction. The bright star Regulus in Leo the Lion, these two objects, Venus the planet and the star, 77 light years away, were extremely close in the sky by less than a degree in the heavens. But the best is yet to come, because as this month opens up, I always mention, as we move toward the new moon, that happens on the 14th, when the sky is dark, the moon is not visible, of course, thus the new moon. If you live in an area that you're listening to the Dr. Sky Experience, that's out and away from a good percentage of city lights, and even if you are, there's still things to see, like the Venus conjunction. The majesty of the summer Milky Way is going to be on tap. It's amazing. Right around 11 p.m., if you look due south, and many people are on vacation during the summer, of course, take a look with the naked eye in a clear, unobstructed view of the horizon. You, ladies and gentlemen, will be treated to seeing a sight of the Milky Way at its core. This is the region of Scorpius, the scorpion, and the majestic constellation Sagittarius. This is laden, right, Bill, with star clouds that are just all overpowering. Binoculars, I guarantee you, right, Bill, people will say, oh, wow, I can't believe that we're seeing that, because 27,000 light years into that big bunch of stars, and that mist, is the biggest location for the galaxy's center. And in that center, ladies and gentlemen, there's a supermassive black hole. Luckily, we're not there, because it eats stars for breakfast, like we might be going in just a moment to the snack bar on the Dr. Sky Experience. Bill, we want to convert the next half hour of this 2-hour show to a conversation with you about Air Force One, the history of what you know about it, the changes that have happened here, and I'm sure many people may have questions about this particular aircraft that now is the replacement temporarily for Air Force One. and exactly what, in your opinion, might have happened with the President of the United States when he was over in Turkey for a summit with NATO, and why he changed planes. There's many stories out there. We don't want to speculate, but we want to get into the meat and the heart of Air Force One, one of the most iconic aircraft in the world. Here on the Dr. Sky Experience, we'll be right back with our special guest, Bill Yenne, and your questions to put you to the front of the Theater of the Mind. 1-800-848-9222. Thank you for being with us.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
My name is Richard Graham, a retired colonel, flew the SR-71 for 8 years. The book I wrote on flying the SR-71 is available. I think you'll enjoy it. It takes you through a complete mission from start to finish. I enjoyed talking with Steve Cates. I look forward to the next time we can talk more about the SR-71 Blackbird. You're listening to the Dr. Sky Show right now.
Air Force One is operated by a specially selected 26-member military crew from the 89th Airlift Wing, based at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. We continue with our special guest, Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer, a man with vast knowledge not only in the aviation world, but in so much about American history, and as from time to time you know, proudly we talk about American exceptionalism. Bill Yenne, talk to us, share knowledge about America's iconic aircraft, Air Force One, some of its history as we move on to current times today.
Well, the first thing I should say is that Air Force One is not an airplane. It is a call sign of any airplane that the President of the United States is aboard. And the airplanes they have been, a half dozen designated airplanes going back to 1943 that have been presidential aircraft. The call sign Air Force One was, it's like a flight number. I'm flying to Phoenix tomorrow on United 1248. It's a flight number, and this whole thing started in the signing of the Air Force One flight number originated in 1954, after 10 years of various aircraft, and it was happened when President Eisenhower was flying somewhere, and air traffic control got confused because they were up to that time they used various call signs for the presidential mission that it didn't highlight the fact that this is the president. Right. So there's been a confusion, which, I don't know that it endangered Eisenhower, but it was definitely something that where he wasn't allowed to land or transit a particular bit of airspace.
Correct.
They initiated Air Force One. Air Force One is the president's airplane, no matter what it is. But there have been a lot of Air Force, a lot of presidential airplanes. The original one was a DC-4, designated VC-54, back in during Roosevelt's administration. He made only a couple of flights on it, and there were. And then when Truman became president, they used They continued to use the VC-54, the Douglas VC-54, for a couple of years. Then they upgraded to a DC-6, designated that as VC-118. And this was in 1947. He named it Independence after his hometown in Missouri. He flew that. Okay. Eisenhower came into office, and he had used a C-121 Lockheed Constellation when he was head of NATO.
And I've seen that plane. Right, I've seen that plane, Columbine. which was beautiful.
Yeah,
I've seen
well, that was Columbine 1, and then when he was as president, he used two Columbines. There was Columbine 2, which was a 121A, and Columbine 3, which was 121E. The name Columbine came from it being the state flower of Colorado, which was his wife's home state. So that's that. Mm-hmm. And then late in his presidency, they decided that he deserved a jet, and this was the advent of the 707 as America's leading jet airliner in the late 50s. So they got a similar design, almost identical to a 707, and designated it as VC-137. And the VC-137s remained in service for decades. And the one that brought Kennedy to Dallas and brought him back to Washington was one of
Bill, that's very interesting because people may not have, people have seen this if they're a little older in years, but for the young audience out there, this was the aircraft at the time of the tragic day in November, obviously the day of President Kennedy's assassination, November 22nd. Yeah. In the back of that airplane there, you see a kind of haphazard swearing in, as many people have reported, to the new president, Lyndon Johnson. And it's so sad because we see pictures, and I've read so much, and I'm sure you know more about it. Poor Jackie Kennedy standing there in her, in her dress and her suit, and she's blood-stained, and she's standing there totally, mesmerized. Of course, who wouldn't be? This is horrible. And apparently a quick swearing in, and then a whole controversy exists, a whole nother show and a whole nother subject about trying to get the president's casket on board the airplane. And you probably know a lot more about that. I mean, a moment in history that many people may not even know about. It was not a smooth affair by any means, correct?
Well, a lot of missions flown by the Air Force have not gone smoothly, but they work at it and they make it happen. And they did that with this, and that was sort of the early days of the VC-137 Air Force Ones, and they continued to serve Johnson and Nixon, Carter, Ford, Reagan. Mm-hmm. Wasn't until George Bush the first that they upgraded to the 747-200s.
The beginning of the 747. 1-800-848-9222 if you have questions regarding this subject. Bill Yenne, of course, author, historian, and book producer, a man that has so many titles and so much information to share with us. But the story continues. This is amazing as we move into the 747 right now era. You described to me off air a while ago that you had ridden in one of these airplanes, but not Air Force One by any means. What did you do? What aircraft was it? And what were you doing, if you can share that?
Well, there's all those years that the VC-137s were flying, they had a fleet of them, just as now they have a fleet of VC-25As. And whatever one the president is on has the Air Force One designation. And so there were a fleet of these things, and this goes back to the 1970s when I was in early 80s when I was doing paintings for the U.S. Air Force Art Collection. That's another
another part of your talent. There you go.
Yeah, and so they worked with the societies of illustrators in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And we produced the paintings, and then we were flown to Washington every year for a presentation, which took place at the Officers Club at Andrews Air Force Base. And they would send an airplane to pick us up. It would stop in San Francisco, fly to L.A., load up a bunch of artists, and fly them to Washington to get into tuxedos and present their paintings to the Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Staff and a whole room full of dignitaries. And usually they sent a C-141 airlifter and starlifter, and which is just a routine airplane with a transport airplane with a not very fancy interior, as it's military transport, and which was fine. It was a free trip, and we had to spend as much time as we wanted on the flight deck. But one year, apparently there wasn't a C-141 available. So here they were at Andrews Air Force Base, and we gotta send a plane out there and pick these people up. They are supposedly important.
You bet. You got to get them to where they got to go.
So they sent a VC-137, and that was pretty amazing. If you've traveled on fancy executive jets. I haven't had the pleasure of doing that very often, but it's a whole different world from military transports or even routine airliners. It was a very, very nice interior, and there were no presidential seals anywhere, but there were places on the walls where they would have been. And but the tail number was a giveaway, because 26,000 was the tail number of the one that was used for Air Force One. This was not that.
If you have questions, folks, 1-800-848-9222 as we move into the last quarter of our show before this particular break. Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer. When we come back, Bill, I'd like to spend the time, if you don't mind, in discussing the latest iteration of Air Force One, the one that some people say was rushed into production. I would disagree. And then, of course, the somewhat controversy that we've heard about, trying to get a declarative, answer to what happened when the president, of course, why. We think we know why there was a change of venue. And I guess the question would be to you, when we hold off on that answer when we come back, is the new airplane, that's the Qatari aircraft, the 800, the 747-8, is it, in your opinion, really up to par? And maybe it doesn't have every single feature that the older 747 has? And then would get you to describe so many of the things that, they're not state secrets, that you can tell us about the older Air Force One, as far as some of the big safety features it has and some of the amazing shielding, electromagnetic pulse shielding, and so much more on an airplane like that. It's an amazing story. And, I've seen, like you have, so many of these 747s. We had an interview not too long ago with a gentleman named Bill Sutter. I don't know if you ever knew him, from Boeing, the designer of the 747. People do hear his little promo every once in a while. What a story. What an airline designer, not only of the 747, but I believe also the 727, if I'm correct on that. But Bill?
Yes, he was a key person at Boeing in the early days of the jet age.
Bill, we'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222. And we thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending a good portion of your weekend as we move into the dog days of summer. I need not remind you about the temperatures that are here, but they're less than that of the planet Venus, which every day the average temperature is 920 degrees Fahrenheit. But, wow, we're only telling you the truth. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Joe, Chuck Yeager. I happen to be the first guy that flew faster than the speed of sound, and it's really a pleasure to participate in Steve's show, Dr. Sky.
Great to hear from the late passage, of course, of General Chuck Yeager, the first man to fly faster than sound, 1947. But some interesting factoids about 747s. How about this? The slowest commercial 747 flew at Mach 0.0. It was converted, a 747-200 Jumbo, into a hotel in Stockholm, Sweden. It had 27 rooms, and you could stay in that kind of remodeled 747 without the wings, I believe, for $200 US dollars. But on a sad note, the worst aviation disaster between 747s happened in the islands, the Canary Islands and Tenerife, when two 747s collided sadly on the ground. 583 souls perished during that moment in time. Bill Yenne joins us, author, historian, and book producer. His website, BillYenne, YENNE.com. Bill, in the moments we have before the close of the show, talk about this Qatari aircraft, the 747, that was gifted to the U.S., some of the things about it that you can tell us, and also what might be, in many people's minds, still an unsolved situation, the change of planes, and obviously many people read into this as maybe there was a threat, again, as we hear about the threats and assassination attempts, hopefully, that never succeed on President, Donald John Trump. Tell us about the Qatari aircraft.
Well, the original 747 Air Force One, the VC-25A, was a stock 200 model with the short upper deck. Boeing had subsequently introduced the longer upper decks in the 747-400 and the 747-8. And it's a better airplane. It's more. There's more room. It's technologically better. Air Force had been working with Boeing for many years to get to develop a new Air Force One airplane, a new VC-25B, and when Trump came into office, he said, "Let's accelerate that thing. There's no reason why this should take years to build up an airplane." Mm-hmm. And well, the Qataris offered him an airplane that they had in their fleet. We have a 747-8. We'll give it to him, and so they did, and it took quite a lot of time, and it took a lot of money to convert this thing, because it needs hardened defenses. It needs communications gear. It needs aerial refueling capability. 747s don't have that.
Exactly, they don't.
The VC-25A had it, and that had to be put into the new presidential airplane. Many things that internally to this airplane needed to be done, but they got it done in less than 2 years. It had been going for 4, 5, 6 years before that, and they still didn't have an airplane to show for it. So they got one off the shelf and upgraded it, and it started flying this month. Yes, he took this airplane to the summit in Ankara, mm-hmm. and they sent the older VC-25A to pick him up, and the reason being that the new airplane does not have the full suite of missile defenses that the Air Force deems as the minimum requirements for flying in a war zone. And, well, what do you have in the Middle East? You have a war zone.
You sure do, Bill, and I'm concerned about one thing here, to go more to the political side of this. I'm not second-guessing anything at this point, but like you and I and everybody listening, we have an ability to say, wait, hold the phone, folks. If you knew that this aircraft, the Qatari aircraft, is not all the way up to speed at this point in time, why would you risk the president's life when you know you're going into a hotbed in that area where even theoretically, or maybe more factually, the Iranians still possess these missiles, some of them which have much longer range, I'm sure, even if they had just a couple? That's a big risk assessment. So it's kind of a little bit surprising that they would even let that happen. But again, thank God our president is safe. But what do you say on that? I mean, I don't want to push you into the political realm too much, but that's that's a little bit miscalculated, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I think I can see everything that you're saying, and I would have to say that I wasn't there. I didn't.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know why. Who made the decision? I don't know why it was made. I do know that the situation in when he went over there was a ceasefire in place, and that ceasefire crumbled while he was there. And I know that he has used the VC-25B in the United States. But, you're asking questions that I'm really not qualified to answer.
No, I totally respect your response, because nobody really can. I mean, we could go off on different tangents, but we like to get facts. And, of course, with your background, you've given us a wealth of information on these subjects of the history of this particular aircraft. And then the question becomes this. What's next, Bill Yenne, for this? I mean, are we now in production so the audience knows that this particular aircraft, the Qatari aircraft, is not going to be the long-stay aircraft? What's in the works right now? Are they building two new ones? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, they're building two new VC-25Bs that look a lot like the Qatari aircraft. But they're coming straight from the Boeing factory, and they're going to have all of the defensive features that are present in the VC-25A that's been around for the last 25 years, and more. And those airplanes are coming.
Do you know when? I mean, is that something that we're talking about, a couple of years?
Yeah, a couple of years, and nobody knows exactly when. That was part of the problem, was they've been working on this for more than a couple of years, and these things just had yet to materialize, and that's why the Qataris said, "Hey, we got one. You can have ours."
I'd love to have one of those, wouldn't you? But I don't think either of us, not to put you in a bad financial situation, I'll be totally honest, and I'm sure everybody listening would, imagine what the rate to run that airplane, the Qatari version.
Yeah, it's a little pricier than I would.
It would be a little out of most people's pockets. I imagine, do you have any clue of what it takes to run one of those 747s per hour? I mean, there's all kinds of numbers out there.
Yeah, I could leaf through some of my notes here and come up with something, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
I get it.
I guess
it's totally.
It's one of those things. If you have to ask, you can't afford it.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's amazing. But the new aircraft that they have right now, the temporary replacement, must be beautiful. I haven't seen, or I don't think anybody's really seen, the beauty of the interior of that aircraft. If there was no such thing as war and bad actors in the world, it's just a gorgeous executive aircraft, right?
Well, yes, it is. It's sort of the best, the best it can be. It was a gorgeous executive aircraft when the Qataris had it. Now it's been remodeled for the president. I bet they've reupholstered all the seats.
And they went over it with a fine-tooth comb, I'm sure, with every surveillance X-ray device known to mankind or whatever, to make sure that aircraft had nothing inside it that compromised on security, communications, or anything else. Bill Yenne, thank you.
You got to remember, this airplane was built in the United States. It was not.
Yes, absolutely. Up in probably
Boeing in Everett, Washington, and
a great place.
So it's an American airplane.
Bill Yenne, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. The clock rules as always here. And again, thank you to all the guests from Hour 1 and everybody, and the callers, as we continue to talk about these great subjects that you tell us. If you have an email that you'd like to send me, I do promise to email back and respond. That's the simple way to do it, the polite way. It's just DRSKY, of course, at WABCradio.com. And we appreciate everybody. Bill, what's next for you? You got about a minute or less Any new book coming that you want to share with us, or any topic?
Well, I've got a few things in the works, but I don't have release dates. Check out just check me out on Amazon or check me out on BillYenne.com, and you'll see all the recent books. And,
Bill, a privilege and honor to have you here. I really mean that. I appreciate it. The clock rules, and I say thank you, and look forward to talking with you about this. And hopefully we'll meet up at some of the air shows in the future where I can shake your hand and get you to sign a couple of my books. And I'm sure my brother Joe from photorecon.net would certainly appreciate the same thing. Bill Yenne, author, historian, and book producer, thanks for being with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Always a privilege.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good morning. Well, folks, that wraps it up. So as we continue to move through time and space here, great guests coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be talking with great guests from the subjects of earthquakes, more into the astronomical world, more about the moon missions, what's happening on the planet Mars with great guests. And, of course, if you have guest suggestions, no guarantee that we'll get them all. Again, my email, drsky@wabcradio.com. And thanks to our helmsmen. They make this show possible. As we normally say, thanks to Bill and Jackson, and whoever's filling in for Jackson. We do appreciate you. Clear skies as we talk about, but more important than that, health and happiness. Stay tuned to WABC for another side of midnight with Lionel as he takes us to the break of dawn as we move through the dog days of summer. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks are back at SIUH Community Park July 7th to the 12th for a 6-game series against the High Point Rockers. Tonight, first pitch is at 6:30. It's Thirsty Thursday with $5 Bud and Bud Light Traps. Friday, July 10th, first pitch is at 7 p.m. May the Force be with you on Star Wars Night with post-game kids glow around the bases with special lightsaber training packs.
Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.